Hello everyone, Shen Thomas here. We're talking about the 8 basic stances of Shaolin Kung Fu, okay? And so I assigned them with the 8 elements of the I Ching, right? Because each one of these stances actually seems to embody that element with how it moves, okay? And kind of what it does with its structure, okay? So far we've covered Mabu, which is horse stance. We've covered Gong Bu, which is Chen, or thunder, right? We've covered Cat stance, Maobu, or fire, which is Li, okay? And then we've talked about lake, which is Jubu, or empty stance, okay? Empty stance, which is lake. And so we've covered those 4. And so now, we're going to talk about Pubu. Pubu, kind of a funny name, Pubu. But what it is it's almost like a dropping stance or a falling stance. Okay? So quite often we might be in a guard stance, somebody throws power at us, and we might turn into, say, a Mabu, and then come back into a Gongbu. Right? Now, Pubu might be they've grabbed us, and so now we're going to drop. So we used to call this stance when we were learning reverse archer, okay? Archer being bow stance or gongbu. Okay, so bow stance or gongbu, your hips are forward and you have the bent knee, about 70% of your weight, 30% on the back. So what happens is we're actually changing so this front leg is straight, and instead of this leg facing the other way, because that would be basically gongbu shifting, right? We actually come down and this leg is straight. So instead of forward here, it actually is at like an L angle with our front leg. Okay, and so if somebody's grabbed us, it's helping us to basically just throw them straight down. Okay. So quite often, this will be used, somebody grabs us, usually like maybe in cat stance, they grab us, and then that way we can move our Pubu forward into them, and then pull them down. And then we'll usually come right back up into Gongbu, right? Or we'll throw them down and use the shield arm and project them. Or we'll throw them down and use a forearm, like right along the neck and shoulders, to throw them off of us, right? So again, Pubu is this idea, if somebody's grabbed us, or say they're throwing a kick at us, we can also use forearms to deflect a kick as we absorb and we move down, okay? So sometimes Pubu is used in Shaolin to move forward, and it doesn't seem possible, but we'll use these overhead forearms to pull an opponent down, and then we'll come back into Gongbu, okay? So Pubu, sometimes they'll call it like a falling stance or a resting stance, right? But it's basically coming back and down. Okay, and then with this stance, you don't want to go too low, because then you can't respond, you know? So you only want to go low enough to have the energy to pull somebody down, but then be able to spring back into Gongbu, or to spring back into Mabu, right? So that is Pubu. And so I think of it as Ka'an in the A element, which means chasm, and I think of it as falling water. So where a lake is this bowl of water sitting up in the mountain, Pubu is basically a waterfall shooting down. And I'll give it a little bit of this shooting energy, kind of like we do with thunder. With thunder, we kind of shoot energy out. Well, Pubu, we're shooting it down. Okay? So if you have an opponent that's really grabbed onto your arms from your body weight and from turning the elbows, so now they're above, then the elbows drive that. Okay? and you're connected with your stance, so your weight and your elbows shoot that energy down and then forward. When you shift back into a forward power stance, like Gong Bu. Okay, so that one's a quick little video on Jubu, or not Jubu, but Pubu. And so you have to think of it as almost being the opposite of Gong Bu, where you make the front leg straight, but this one comes out at an angle. So you're not here, you're at that L shape, but you're able to pull down or to block down and then spring back up. So this angle leg then in turn comes back in under to become a Gong Bu and to shoot that power back off. So Pubu is dropping down, and you know, Pubu can be done where I step forward with it into the opponent. So maybe they grab my arms and I'm stepping forward into them, but I'm shooting them down and then coming back up into them. Okay? So I think of that one as following water, which is Ka'an. And so then we'll match it up with, say, Li, and we move into Ma Bu, and we go into Gong Bu, and then maybe we'll come back into Pubu. And then from Pubu, we might take a step back into Jubu, right? Or we might go Pubu, back into Gong Bu, back into Ma Bu, back into Mao Bu, right? And then Jubu, right? So again, that's the, what I call the Kan or the Chasm, the falling water, you know. And in Shaolin, you'll find that they do various things with that, but it's usually they've projected and then they're coming back, and then they'll project again. So they'll do this a lot in Shaolin, where they'll come back and project, but sometimes they'll even come forward with that. Come forward and then shift, or come back and then shift. Okay, well, thanks again for joining me.